It's nice to see everybody here. My name is Susan Bransfield. I'm the first select woman of the town, and you're here tonight for a public hearing. Rick, this is yours.
Oh, thank you.
And I think our selectmen are here. If you would just raise your hand. Jim Tripp, Mr. Pear is here, Lou Pear is here, Ralph Zampano, Rick Shar, Mike Pelton. Am I missing anybody? And myself. And we're hosting the meeting tonight to get input, but we also want to give you some updates from committee work. Now, as you may or may not know, there are two committees. One is a committee appointed by the selectmen to look at what sidewalk should be replaced and when and how and bidding and all of that. And the chairman, there's two chairmen, it's Bob Herron and John Hall, who's in the front. Any other members of that committee here? Mr. Aguilati's here. Anybody else? And Rick Kelsey, Public Works Director, is also on that committee. Some of the other members may join us, but their work will be presented tonight by that sidewalk committee. And then we have a sidewalk ordinance committee, which Jim Tripp and Lou and Mike are officially on. And we have been meeting to try to resolve some of the management, implementation, how and wherefores, because that's made up of the Board of Selectmen. And ultimately, as you know, the Selectmen will make the decisions, but they want to make a more informed decision. And when we passed this bond referendum in November of 2016, before we passed it, we had a public hearing, and some of the questions that you're still asking were asked then. And what we said was we would convene public hearings so that you would know ahead of time what is going on and what will actually be implemented. So tonight, there's not a final decision because this is a hearing, and it's a time for the public to know the progress and for the selectmen to learn what you think and what your opinions are. So to start the meeting, I will read the call of the meeting so you know officially that this was legally noticed for Wednesday, January 17, and pursuant to the town charter, the Portland Board of Selectmen will hold the public hearing in the public library, and we're going to discuss removal of sidewalks potentially, compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act, tree and root removal and what implications those may have, the potential of cost-sharing repairs. And by that we mean between the town, coffers, and individual property owners. We'll talk about that. And some of the streets we're going to talk about tonight include Spring, Fairview, Waverly Ave, Freestone Avenue, East Main Street between Fairview and Spring, and we can also certainly talk about other streets as well. I received, at least so far, and certainly you can send me emails at any time or letters at any time, two written communications which I'm going to share. The first is from Larry Cerulik of 13 Bell Court. I'd like to have the following comments concerning the establishment of new sidewalk ordinances read into the record on January 17. The responsibility of repairing or replacing sidewalks should be placed wholly on the infrastructure budget of the town of Portland. Exceptions would be in cases where the homeowner needs to temporarily remove a section of sidewalk to repair a driveway or other contingencies such as a broken water line. I recently had to remove 3 blocks of sidewalk in order to replace a broken water line to my house. The sidewalk replacement cost $1,500. With about 100 feet of sidewalk bordering my house, the bill to replace it would come to well over, now this is his estimate, $12,000. An onerous amount for anyone, but especially onerous for seniors on fixed incomes. Sidewalks are part of public domain, the same as roadways, and should be maintained by the town, the same as roadways, except for snow removal. And this was Lawrence Cerulik, who lives at 13 Bell Court. And Larry certainly does have a sidewalk. Okay, the next one. Excuse me. I write to acknowledge receipt of the legal notice of the public hearing of the Board of Selectmen scheduled for tonight at the library. Since I'll not be available, I'm writing my thoughts on the proposed topic. To contextualize the discussion, from my point of view, I am the property owner of 339 and 341 Main Street. Facing toward the public sidewalk, the private property to my left belongs to Ken Kupek, and to my right is the Episcopal Church. Not having attended the first hearing, I don't have a feel for the heart of the argument or any nuances thereof going on in the town other than what's stated on the legal notice. And he repeats the removal of sidewalks, the ADA compliance, the tree and root removal, the potential of cost-sharing repairs, and the specific streets involved. And he asks me to read his reflections. Number one, with regard to the possible removal of the sidewalks, I leave that to the discretion of the Board of Selectmen. My family and I rarely use them. However, I believe in supporting the common good. I know, for example, that these specific sidewalks serve the clients of Stonehaven while walking to meetings that are held at the Episcopal Church. Number two, likewise, in order that the town comply with Americans for Disabilities Act, it would be useful to have sidewalks that serve such citizens, whether temporary or permanent. However, one would wonder why such ADA concerns don't apply to other parts of town where permanent citizens live and don't have sidewalks. For example, do some elderly residents at Job's Pond need a sidewalk put in? Or is the discussion limited only to extant sidewalks because taxpayers are protesting about the possible funding? Has it just become politically expedient? Once again, the common good applies to everybody, not just a few streets, and it shouldn't be manipulated now for political reasons. Number three, in reference to tree and root removal, my family was forced some time ago to accept removal of a tree that was in front of our house. We didn't want it removed and were told we were obliged and had no say in the matter. Furthermore, we were left with an unsightly stump directly in front of the house, and we had to pay to have that stump removed. Number four, let it be known and clear that I am not interested in paying for, quote, cost-sharing repairs, end quote, since I already pay more than $500 a month in tax, property tax, for the upkeep of our town. The common good needs to be assessed by the selectmen and women, and taxpayer money used to enact what they deem correct according to state and federal laws. For example, I never attended and currently don't attend public schools, nor do I have children who attend public schools, nor yet my tax money goes to pay for them. There are some roads in Portland on which I've never traveled, and yet I pay for their snow removal. When a sinkhole appeared in the front of my house on the so-called town side of the property, on the other side of the sidewalk, I called the town, and I was cited chapter and verse that I was responsible and the town would not be. Yet the town did support gas lines to go down the street. These are anomalies to these discussions and to my point. Otherwise, if you have some citizens protesting the renewal of the sidewalks and stating that those on whose property they lie should share in the cost from private funds, simply write down their names, determine if they've ever had children in public schools here, prorate the amount of 10 years of my tax money, and have them give me a check. I shall use their money as my private contribution to the common good for the sidewalk. Since I help their children to go to good schools, they can now help me to share in the cost for the new sidewalks. This is the principle of reciprocity. Number 5, with reference to the specific streets in my particular area under discussion, the town could ask the businesses and the private citizens between Fairview and Spring Streets to provide their last tax statements to the IRS. And based upon income, one's private contribution could be determined on a scale, and this involves the principle of equity. Lastly, I call attention of the Sidewalk Committee to the following. Don't fix what is not broken. For example, I cannot presume to speak for my neighbor, Mr. Kupik, but it appears to me that neither the public sidewalk in front of his house nor mine are not level or are cracked, broken, or in need of dire repair. It's difficult right now to inspect because of the snow, but those places where huge trees displaced and broke the sidewalks with roots are very visible. Fix them. I'm not an engineer, but in my humble opinion, one doesn't necessarily need to replace the entire sidewalk system from Fairview to Spring Street for the sake of uniformity, but for safety and for handicapped persons who deserve and have the right of passage. In sum, while I'm in favor of supporting the common good, I'm not in favor of doing it unjustly and without equity for all citizens. It's like saying the law applies to some citizens some of the time, depending if they live at Great Hill Lake or closer to the Glastonbury line. Private cost sharing is not an option when the same citizens pay into public funds. If the town wants to use public money to fix sidewalks for Americans with Disabilities Act or any other reason, then the selectmen need to allocate public funds. Otherwise, citizens will begin to nickel and dime each other in all things, as I have illustrated in my examples above. As a former student of canon and civil law, it's worthy of note that people have rights and obligations in civil society. However, as you can see from the examples provided thus far, when a debt was incurred by the town, such as the involuntary tree removal or the sinkhole, it did become my obligation and I didn't have any rights. Now that the discussion is about spending public funds on the common good, there's unjust discussion about extinguishing rights and enforcing only obligations. Let there be a tide of change, and I thank you for your kind consideration to my opinion on this matter, and I remain respectfully yours, Kevin Randall. So that's item number 1, or 2. And the other one was from Mr. Cerulic. So now we'll move on to the 2 presentations, and Bob Herron will start, and I'd like to have them finish their presentations, and then we'll go around the room for your comments and observations. So, Bob Herron.
Thank you, Susan. Hi, everyone. Scared of the mic here. My name is Bob Herron. Some of you saw me before in October, see me around. John Hall, gentleman in the center of that part of the aisle, is the co-chair of the committee. And as Susan said, I'm going to do basically a quick review of a few points that the Sidewalk Committee wants to cover with you tonight. I don't think my section will take more than 5 minutes, maybe 6. Recommendations. So first, recommendations and some notices. Sidewalk Committee would like the BOS, we have, I guess, for the last 7+ months been meeting. We've been keeping them informed of our progress, and we have a few requests tonight based on our last meeting. What we're looking for from the BOS is a clear go-ahead signal on the sidewalks and areas, hopefully tonight, or hopefully soon thereafter, so we can begin to work with the Public Works Department to continue to get more preliminary costs and engineering components, and basically get it a step closer to creating the final bid documents. 2, kind of as a public notice or heads up, the Public Works Department is working on a letter to be sent out to property owners that would be affected by any sidewalk construction in order to grant a temporary easement for any work that may be done on sidewalks in front of their property where some of the work might be slightly outside the town's right-of-ways. That's just kind of a heads up. There's no timeline on that, but I would say, sometime over the next 4 to 8 weeks you should see a letter, just so you know that's coming. Third thing was cost sharing and any ordinance amendments. Again, Sidewalk Committee strongly encourages the BOS to discuss and resolve any cost-sharing agreements as well as any ordinance amendment questions over the next few weeks and hopefully finalize in February. The sooner the better. The Sidewalk Committee, again, we've been working on what we think of as phase 1, a first kind of $1 million worth of linear feet of this project, and we'd love to start working on phase 2 as far as where we would recommend the BOS start to look at. but we really feel that, honestly, understanding what kind of cost sharing is going to be passed, approved, that is really important before we go out to bid. That would really be helpful. Another point is that tonight is really not a moment to dig into the specifics of why they're on this street and not. Having said that, it's going to be public comment, and if that's why you're here tonight, let it go. Talk about it, whatever you want. That whole cost sharing point, though, to me is more important about tonight's meeting, to get a feel from the public, good, bad, and different, where we are. Also, Rick Kelsey is here. A round of applause for Rick Kelsey, who has, on his own volition, come tonight. He's hurting, and just so you know, no one give him a quick, sharp jab to the ribs. But Rick has been really working hard on the drawings, and he has some detailed drawings. So if you're here as a property owner on some of the streets that we're talking about, or just curious, Rick's probably got a dozen maps back there that you can peel through and actually see your property and what some of the stuff that he's looking at, property lines, distances, as much as he's been able to get over the past few months. It's still a work in progress, but it is here tonight, or you can go and make an appointment to see Rick afterwards, or with the Board of Selectmen, if you need more information, or if you think of something tomorrow after tonight. And now for the overview. And I just basically have one snapshot PDF from a MAPS application, and I'm going to just highlight the streets and talk about the streets that the Sidewalk Committee is recommending for the Board of Selectmen to move forward on. Okay, hang on. And hopefully this is on or not. Hello? I don't know. Maybe it's not even needed. It's on. Okay. So, if you've seen this before, it might be because we had something in October, but if you were here, you remember that the PC was not really working that well. So, tonight, and I don't know if you can see that. Oh, so great. So I'll kind of start up at the top. So, again, Spring Street from Main to a little beyond East Main, basically there's a driveway from Greystone that comes down this way. So on Spring Street, the current sidewalk is on the north side between those streets, so that's what's being recommended. Then you're going to cross over to the south side, and this piece is then recommended from this Phase 1. This blue line represents the work. There's going to be, as you may know, some sewer work and road work done in that area. Any sidewalks that are disturbed due to that work will be replaced under that portion of the bond money. So that's kind of where I put that there, but just so you understand that there will be, from High Street down to Main Street, a complete stretch of sidewalk, is what the plan is. All right, so then, this is kind of in order of priority. Again, until we get preliminary costs and get a little more information, we really don't know how much of this we can do, but again, we're fairly confident most of this can be done. So Freestone Avenue, on both sides of the street from Main to East Main. Then, excuse me, on the south side of the street only, which is, if you're familiar with St. Mary's Church, basically to the section that is St. Mary's property, and we're basically skipping over St. Mary's property since that sidewalk's in pretty good shape, and we're going to pick it up on that side of the driveway and go down to Cross, and then all the way down to High. So again, the idea is that on the south side, there'll be a continuous sidewalk from Main to High Street, and on the south side, at least from East Main to Main Street. Around the corner, also in that, there's a little section here connecting 66 to Freestone that is going to be connected. I believe it's primarily in front of Daniel's Oil right now. So right there. The next street, just Fairview was the next one in order of priority. Mainly, you can see there's Biz, is that by the pointer there? And on both sides of Fairview to East Main. And then Waverly, which is again where the Waverly Center is. And on both sides, except for the area that's just been done in front of the Senior Center, to East Main. And then I believe the next on our little priority list was the section from Freestone to Waverly, East Main, both sides of the street. And then the very last section again, if there's enough funding, is to go back over to Freestone and on the north side from East Main all the way down to Cross Street. Again, we have to wait till we get some preliminary costs back. Rick will get more engineering work. Some of it may or may not be able to be done, but that's where we stand right now. I'd like to keep in mind for everyone that the Public Works Department came up with over $3 million worth of sidewalk replacements that were needed a couple years ago. So obviously, our sidewalk committee was only basically given $1 million to go through, along with a few other parameters, being near the schools, et cetera. And we realize that there's more to be done. Are happy to be looking at phase 2. But that's basically it, just so everyone's on the same page of what streets we're looking at as it speaks right now. That's it. And then I think Jim Tripp had the next part of the presentation, and Jim, I'm going to key up your presentation here.
Sure.
Okay.
All right. Everyone hear me all right? All right, well, good evening. I'm Jim Tripp, and it's good actually. It's funny, about 20 minutes before the meeting started, there were only a few people in here, and it was commented that, maybe we're not going to have as much of a turnout. Very glad to see most of the seats filled, because one of the things we do need some feedback tonight. We're looking at different options. One of the things that Bob has talked about and highlighted is that we've got $3 million worth of sidewalks that we have to look at, and we need to figure out a way in how we're going to get to an end state where they're all in an improved condition, right? How do we start driving towards that goal? What we looked at on our committee, what we talked about is that, just really try to say, okay, where are we now, right? What's the current status? And currently, the abutters have been required of the properties. This is going back, I think the original ordinance was 74 years ago, and I think it was revised about 30 years ago. So it's kind of gone through the ages. The requirement has been the responsibility of the abutter to maintain the sidewalks. Many residents have. I do remember at the last public hearing, there were several who stood up at that hearing and commented on the work that they had done at their house to try and work in accordance with that. So we want to acknowledge that, but we also have to acknowledge that the way things are today is not working well enough. The sidewalks are not in the condition that I think, from a community perspective, we would all like them to see. And we want to figure out and see how we address that. Our goal was to try to provide a program to leverage the $1 million for sidewalk infrastructure, how it was authorized, and how we can basically enhance the safety of our sidewalks, and really try to see how we can broaden the impact, the positive impact of that money over the broadest range of taxpayers and of the broadest range of folks, and try to get the broadest amount of sidewalks that are done. We figure that's just kind of how can we more fairly distribute that money and have the biggest impact in those areas that have sidewalks. That's the goal. That's what we're trying to figure out, and trying to figure out how to craft a program that is somewhat sustainable so that over time we can systematically keep addressing the sidewalks. That's not another part of the goal that we tried to set out. All right, we really come up with 3 options. Okay, the first one is very straightforward. Actually, they're all fairly straightforward, but we're going to go through them. There's pros and cons. You guys may see other pros and cons, and we can certainly, again, that's why we're having the hearing. Really, the first option would be, if option 1, I shouldn't say the first, I don't want to put them in any order of precedence, but the option 1 would be the town spends the $1 million, looks at the recommendations of the sidewalk committee, and just moves forward as is. Basically looking and prioritizing the replacement of larger sections of the sidewalks, and depending on what money is left over, either from some of the locations we've looked at, leverages what's called adults, so that if you have sidewalks we know we need to do, and then depending on how good the bid comes back and what money is left over, it has optional pieces of sidewalk, optional sections that we could address. Potentially looking at some of that money that would come in from adults and targeting some of the areas where we need repairs. But the priority would be large-scale replacement of the sidewalks. The pros, simple to implement. You just start on one end, what needs to be repaired, replaced. You just go straight through. St. Mary's in that area is in good shape, so that would be skipped. but anything that's at all questionable or any sections of good sidewalk that are largely surrounded by bad sidewalk would just get replaced. And when it's done, you have contiguous sidewalk that is probably not going to last you 30, 40 years if properly maintained. The other pro is it leverages the work. The Sidewalk Committee has been meeting for 7 months. There's been a lot of good work, a lot of good discussion. It leverages that work. The cons is it actually could work out where it benefits a minimum number of residents, and that's a concern for us. If you basically focus it on a couple streets, we don't know where the next, or how we're going to come up with another pot of money that's going to be able to address sidewalks in a larger way. So there could be almost a starts and fits. You do a lot of work, and then we end up pulling back a little bit in terms of how much work we can accomplish. That's one of the reasons why we wanted to at least construct an option 2. It's basically a program. It's a 50-50 cost share model. It's one of the goals is to look at how do you provide some relief from the current ordinance, right, that requires 100%. Come back off of that because that's obviously not working and not a fair distribution where we're at now, and it's not going to get us where we need to go. But basically leverage a 50-50 cost share model. Use the $1 million as an incentive program. Basically look at the pieces that have to be replaced and provide an incentive in terms of half the cost of doing that work. It's interesting, would probably work out to be a little bit more. One of the things that our first Selectwoman Bransfield commented on was an estimate of $12,000 to do 100 feet. One of the benefits of doing this in this kind of a model is there would be the advantage of the contractor pricing, which we would believe would be south of that of what an individual could get. If I'm going to go as an individual and say I want a price for just my 100 feet, that contractor has to come, bring his equipment, do just that 100 feet, and then he leaves. It's not very efficient when compared to him coming to and bringing his equipment to town and setting up and doing a mile or 2 miles of sidewalk. So there is some benefits in terms of the cost per foot, and I believe in terms of taxes. One of the other things we would look at doing, and we'll get more into the program in a minute, but it basically provides us a mechanism where, because of cost recovery, you have something that's a little bit easier to have an ongoing program, okay? The cons, it's much more complex to administer. You have to keep track of, who's participating, who's opted out. You have to keep track of how much sidewalk is being done at each place, and if there's going to be assessments, you have to make sure that the assessments are administered accurately, etc. So it's much more complex to administer. That would be something the town would manage. And then just as equally is it then would require, another con is that, it would require residents of the abutters to pay 50%, right? So we acknowledge that's definitely, it's a con to the program if you're an abutter and you have that property, okay? Third option that we would put in is, in a lot of ways, very similar to option 1. But what it does, it takes the $1 million in the sidewalk infrastructure, and it targets, instead of targeting primarily just the large sections on both sides of the road, it looks at doing maybe on some of those streets, especially you kind of have 2 sets of streets, right? You have what you can almost term your feeder streets that are your side streets that connect between High Street and Main Street, where a lot of people walk. And then you've got, obviously, the collector streets, which are your High Street and your Main Street. If you did one side of those feeder streets, if you will, so you're providing at each one of those streets a safe sidewalk to get to either of those connecting streets, that would also save some money in the program to then also target primarily some of those other areas in town that we need to look at, where we need to do some smaller scale repairs. Okay, the locations on Main Street, some of those, like the one that sticks up in the air that everyone sees that has the orange, things of that nature, it allows you to spread that money over a little bit larger area and start targeting some of those areas that we know from a safety consideration need to be addressed. Okay? Again, similar in option 1, other than we would look at maybe one side of the street in terms of the work that was done. That gives you the ability to focus a lot more on trying to improve some of the specific safety areas that you're concerned about, and may possibly also hit a couple of other streets in those feeder streets. You might be able to pick up another street and do some of those other repairs. We'd have to see what the numbers are, because we don't know those yet. A lot of work has been done really around phase one. There's a lot of good data that we have now, but we don't have all the data to look at some of these other options. But that's part of what our job will be, depending on what we all come to a conclusion of tonight. We can go to the next one. Oh, one of the cons of that program, also not tremendously self-sufficient, right? So we just have to be aware of that. It's basically, we'd be spending $1 million. The key there would be is if we're going to have a program that doesn't have, isn't going to be as easy to be an ongoing or a broad-scale ongoing program, then try to spread the benefits out over as much as we possibly can in that one shot, okay? That, where we're doing something large scale. Option one, just for the detail, again, a little bit redundant, but what basically would work, town would pay 100% of the cost to replace the sidewalk. Town would manage the project, start to finish, all the permitting, contractor management. It's basically would just be turnkey. There's nothing that you guys would have to worry about. Focus on replacing, the program would focus on replacing large contiguous sections of sidewalks, but may include repairs of some smaller sections to improve safety. The qualifications, again, fairly straightforward. To facilitate management of the program, I'm reading these to make sure I get them accurate. To facilitate management of the program and generate cost efficiencies, streets will be targeted in phases. That basically would be the phases from our sidewalk committee. Again, I chair the sidewalk ordinance committee, right? And basically how we would implement this and how it works with respect to the ordinance. The sidewalk committee are the folks that have been doing all the work evaluating the sidewalks and trying to come up with a targeting plan. We would look at those references, and basically it would be targeted in phases based on the recommendations of the sidewalk committee and as approved by the Board of Selectmen. The program is applicable to work performed by the town selected contractor. We just put that in there because it's obviously, we wouldn't be looking for folks to hire their own contractor and then say, you know, hey, you're paying 100%. And then, in some cases, temporary easements may be required. This is true of all of those. And what that has respect to is if there's work being done on the sidewalk, there's possibility, and Rick will correct me, I'm sure, if I'm in any way wrong, if there's work that requires some impact to your property that's not inside the town taking line, basically in the town right-of-way, there's just a temporary easement required to allow the crew to do that work. It's nothing that's permanent, nothing that would go on a deed, it's just a temporary easement so that you understand the work that the town's going to be performing, how it's going to impact in terms of people working on your property, and then it goes away when the work's complete. All right, the 50-50 as an option two. Town would pay 50% of the costs to replace the sidewalk. 50% match from residents can be in the form of a multi-year assessment to minimize the impact of those costs. Town would manage the project again, all permitting, engineering, the drawings, everything start to finish would be managed by the town. Qualifications in this case would be to generate the efficiencies, the street will be targeted in phases. So it wouldn't be, we would still, on an organized basis, start targeting the streets that have been evaluated as the committee would start looking at, for example, phase two. Because in this case, we know we would have, over time, some money coming in for a phase two, okay? Excuse me. And again, the town would manage the project start to finish. The qualifications, again, let's see, the program is applicable to the work performed by the town-selected contractor. That's important because of option 5, because of qualification 5, but 3, cost allocation will be based on linear frontage of the property. If property is located on a corner lot, frontage being replaced on each street shall be calculated, and the cost allocation would be based on the longer of the two measures. So if you live on a corner lot, you don't pay both streets. That would just be unfair. You basically would just pay one of the two. And that would be the 50% match on one of the two, okay? In some cases, temporary easements, again, that's going to be a thread that runs through all of them. And again, some folks may feel that their sidewalks are in good shape, that they're safe. They may say, I only have 1 or 2 panels. I feel that I can replace them more economically, or that I can do the work myself if there's a contractor. We have some folks that have done some very nice work in front of their house that are contractors on their own. So we have also in there that residents may opt out of the program if they desire to perform the necessary work themselves or via their contractor. All work must be properly permitted and performed in accordance with the specifications for sidewalks as defined in the ordinance and specified by the Director of Public Works. So in other words, as long as, if you opt out and you're going to do the work, you just have to make sure the work's accomplished to the same specifications, okay? One of the goals is to try to get the sidewalks into a condition where they're going to last for a long time. You can go to the next one. Option 3, town would pay 100% the cost to replace or repair the sidewalk. Town would manage the project. In this case, though, again, we sort of flipped the script a little bit, right? The focus would be on replacing larger sections of sidewalks on one side of the targeted streets in order to stretch funding and allow repair of smaller section sidewalks for additional safety and improvements on other streets. For example, on Main Street. Okay, we know we have a few places on Main Street. They've been a little tougher to see with some of the snow, but we know that they're we would definitely want to take a look at those and see if we could hit some, especially some of what, the raised nails, the ones that really stick up at you and can be a tripping hazard. Qualifications are very straightforward. To facilitate management of the program, we again would do the same thing where we would do it in phases. In this case, we would look at maybe doing one side of each street versus on both sides, but you can broaden the impact to other areas of the town by doing that. And then the last two are the same, the selected contractor. We've put 3 options up there. If there are elements that you like, if somebody says, geez, I like this idea of doing, one side, but I'm okay with doing a cost share. We can mix and match a little bit. There are options. We're definitely open to the feedback as a committee. We want to get the feedback. We want to understand what folks are thinking. It was instrumental. I know that I was lucky enough to sit in at the last public hearing, and it was interesting because that was some of the feedback that I heard. Everybody was aware of what the current ordinance was, and there were folks that had already done the work on the property and wanted to know how it was going to work going forward, right? So I know this is a hot topic, and we're definitely interested in the feedback so that we can make an informed decision going forward. I want to thank everybody for their time. I am done. Thank you.
Okay, so that ends our presentation portion of the public hearing. And tonight, we'll start on this side of the room, and we'll go to the front row. I don't know that there'll be comments since they're here to listen. Second row? Chris? Yeah, it'd be better. That way we'll have it on the record. Thanks, Chris. And I am the recording secretary, too.
So then I'll speak slow.
Okay. And spell the hard words, okay?
Chris Donahue, Fairview Street. So, a couple things. So, Bob, could you call up your map, please, first? So, the highlighted ones are the ones that are first priority. So, I first have a question on, in Jim, your presentation, you talked about Main Street, which is now highlighted as a priority. And the other one is East Main Street that's not outlined as a priority, though it looks to me like I would personally feel East Main Street is one of the worst roads for sidewalks around the downtown area. And it looks like the Public Works have already started a tree removal program to take out some of that. So I don't know why that's not on the list of things to do. Other point I have is, I guess, Jim, and I'm going to go out of order because of everything that came up, but Jim, you talked about if I lived on a corner lot, I would only be assessed for, if we did the 50-50 split, 50% of the cost of only one side of the road. So if I have a corner lot and my corner lot is 200 linear feet of sidewalk because it wraps around a corner, I'm only going to be charged for 50% of 100 feet based on that.
Well, say one side was 120.
Let's just
And
say
the
it's
other side is
100 each.
Well, if 100 each, you'd be charged for 100.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to be charged for 100 or 50% of 100?
feet, okay, and it
And
would be
50%.
yes.
But if I live on a street where I have a wide expanse on that main road, and my street sidewalk is 100 linear, or 200 linear foot, or 100, I'm being charged for more. So I don't understand, if I have more sidewalk in front of my property, on a corner lot versus a straight lot, then why are we even giving anyone a cost share cut? So I think you guys should look at that. I personally don't think we should be cost sharing anything. I think part of the sidewalk problem, I think, in town that I think someone put trees up that caused a lot of sidewalk damage, and I don't think it was the town, the owners of the property, because a lot of the trees are between the road and where the sidewalk is. Another aspect, if I'm on the blue part of Spring Street, I'm assuming that's a brand-new sidewalk, because the sidewalk there is, I'm not sure if you could distinguish between if it's the road or the sidewalk. Right, so it's not really a sidewalk, so if that gets done through a phase, because we're gonna have to do sewer and water main work, do those people on that street get charged? Or is that part of the
The
time?
plan is, Chris, for that one, if I could, the plan for that is because the road is going to be torn up, you can't, the sidewalk will be part of the road project.
Well, and that's what I assume, and I just want to get to point out that anyone who has a sidewalk or a future sidewalk to be on Upper Spring Street, we'll call it, is getting a free sidewalk in front of their property that all
Well,
the...
technically, those dollars would come from the section of the bond that was in reference to the road work, not the sidewalk work. Because we have a...
I understand, yes, I agree, I get it's getting paid, but they're not going to get assessed back
Correct.
50% of the
Correct.
cost.
You
But
are correct.
if I live slightly down the street on Spring Street, I'm going to be asked to pay. So I just think we just need to figure out all this stuff out. I'm in favor of sidewalks on only one street. So, Jim, I'm not sure what I got out of you when you said some sidewalks, if they're a feeder street or not a feeder street, are going to have sidewalks on both sides or not.
All I'm, in terms of trying to orient, is if you look, you have your side streets, and then you have you have Main Street, and you have East Main Street, and you have High Street. That would almost be, if you will, the collectors, right? All the side streets tie into those at different points. And then you have your feeder streets, which, that feeding those collectors, which are all your Freestone, Waverly, right, Fairview, that all tie into Main Street.
Okay, so, yeah, my understanding then from what you're saying is Main Street, East Main Street, and High Street, those would be streets where you think there should be double sidewalks on both sides? As a main, no? No, if they're there or not, but they're not the feeder streets where you're saying,
What I'm saying is for option 3, right, where at least on these streets that are basically connecting into Main Street, which is more of the main travel pathway, a lot of people are gonna walk, they're gonna walk to Main Street and hit the businesses, or they're gonna walk to High Street and, or to, High Street and go to the school, or they're gonna walk to East Main, go to, town offices, or whatever, right, wherever they go. On those streets, at least on those streets which have lower in traffic than Main and East, High Street, if you had sidewalks, good sidewalks on one side of the road, as opposed to paying for two, that frees up some dollars to do some stuff on Main Street and on some other areas. It's
okay,
needed.
clear,
all it
that's
is.
good. And I'm perfectly fine with that, because I don't think our town is busy enough that we need anywhere in the downtown section other than Main Street to have sidewalks on both sides of the road. So, obviously, people here have their own opinion on that, but if we could spend the money more because we're only gonna do one side, to me, half of Fairview Street has sidewalks only on one side. It's only the lower side after East Main to Main Street that has on both sides. Doesn't make any sense to me. East Main Street has sidewalks, well, I guess you could call them sidewalks, on both sides until you get to the cemetery on the west side of the street, and then you don't have one. So I don't know why we would waste any money putting that sidewalk back in or repairing the sidewalk, because I think East Main Street, the eastern side, would be where we'd get more value about a sidewalk. The same thing on High Street, or excuse me, Spring Street, if the same thing. Again, if we're gonna fix the sidewalk, fix it on one side and make it continuous. And I'm all in favor of fixing the sidewalks, because my wife and I and my kids, we all walk. We walk up at the reservoirs, up in the state, we also walk downtown a lot. And I am in agreement that they are drastic. I guess my problem is, you're now gonna ask people in town, in one of these scenarios, to share a cost that I think it's still debatable what our ordinance really says, because if our ordinance is really that enforceable, I'm not sure why we as a town haven't enforced this for years. I think most people feel that their sidewalk is all about, I keep it clean during the snowstorms and make sure it's not icy, and that's my responsibility. And that's what it is. But again, like I said, in some instances, I think we as a town put in trees between where the sidewalk is and the roadway, and a lot of those trees are what's causing the problem on Main Street and East Main Street. I'm just concerned that East Main Street is not a priority on this map, nor is Main Street. And again, my original understanding is Main Street was iffy because we weren't sure if it was a state highway and who had maintenance over it or not.
That is correct.
So I'm not even sure why we're even gonna talk about that right now if we can't figure that out. But again, East Main Street seems like, to me right now, it's in some kind of flux in terms of something's possibly getting done, it's not, but it doesn't make a priority list. But, again, you're asking, just like the town is now being asked to front a whole bunch of money that state won't pay, you're gonna be asking a lot of people in town who don't have the money to come up with sidewalks. And I'll point out, my part of Fairview Street where I live, sidewalks on the opposite side of the street. So apparently it's not any money out of my game. It's just, I just think, again, part of this is our responsibility as a town to take care of some of this.
If I could just interject, I have asked Carrie Olson, who is our town attorney, to weigh in on this, and she is going to prepare a memo that discusses whether or not towns should share costs, should consume the cost, or it should be by the contiguous landowner. She verbally does question whether it is defensible to have the contiguous landowner either share or have the entire cost. So I asked her to put that in writing, so
why is it
we'll
in
be
the
able.
ordinance then?
Because
So he can come up there, I'll leave. I just,
Okay, yep.
sorry, I just want to.
I opened it
Yeah,
up, so I will answer you. Ordinances can be written at certain times, and they may be applicable to that certain statute. Over time, they're sometimes proven to be not valid by way of practice. So what she said, and what you'll hear a lot from town attorneys, is to say, well, you can do X, Y, or Z, but you are subject to possibly someone coming to you and saying, I disagree with you, and I'm going to sue you, and then in court, you're proven right or you're proven wrong. And it is, she doesn't represent only Portland, she represents many other towns. So you could talk to attorney A to Z, and they may have different opinions, but since she is our town attorney, we'll be listening to her memo that comes forward. It's happened in other towns. So we don't want to do something that's going to be, I think, questionable. We want to do the best that we can. So one of the reasons we're having this public hearing is so that we can not only tell you what we know, but you tell us what you know. So the decision, as I said at the beginning, is not made right this minute, but after all this information, the selectmen will be making the decision.
And is there any thought, so in that terms of, if the town planted that tree and that tree grew and ruined the sidewalk, does that now, whose responsibility is that what caused the damage on the sidewalk? So, I mean, that's, to me, some of those trees that were put in the town right-of-way land between the roadway and the sidewalk is what's causing many of the sidewalk problems. So again, I'm in favor of sidewalks. I think the town should be paying for it. I think we should look for ways to skim it out. I don't think many of our roads, and I'll tell you, all the side streets other than Main Street, in my opinion, don't need sidewalks on both sides of the street, and I think that's how you can spread the money. But, again, 50-50, I don't think that's the right thing to do. I think most of the sidewalks are damaged because of other reasons, and I think in this hard time, economic times, people are having enough trouble paying their ends meet, and we bonded $1 million for something, and at the same time, why is it 50-50 and not 70-30, 80-20, or some kind of same kind of state give back that if we build a school or something else, there's a different 80-20, 70-30 split. So again, I think it's just it's a number you guys came up with to start with, but again, I'd be more in favor of fixing the sidewalks that need to be fixed, one side of the street only, whatever it is, and the town pays for it. And again, I'm just concerned that East Main Street, which I think is one of the worst streets in the downtown area, aside from Main Street, isn't even on the list of priorities. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll continue on that row, Michael Pilton's row. Anybody else? Tom? No? Next row. Rich, are you getting? Oh, okay.
Rich Faraci, 15 Fairview Street, Portland. First was the referendum didn't give us the illusion of a 50-50 split. It was for sidewalks to be done on the whole package, roadways, parks, etc. And does this only pertain to existing walks? Like on Spring Street, they're going to get new sidewalks because of construction, and you're there, you might as well do it, and I agree with it. But when we do, let's say, by the Quarry Park, is that going to be burdened on the taxpayers as a whole, or is it going to be part of the Quarry Park's bill, the oil refineries, et cetera, of that nature? And the other, is there a plan for expansion? Meaning, we have a new park going there, we already have sidewalks coming down High Street, heading toward the Swedish Cemetery. Are we going to connect to Bartlett Street and go down that way? Is there a future, let's say 20 years from now, I mean a future, not next year. But is there going to be a plan for expanding it? I agree with walking. I don't do it myself, but I think people should.
I'll just answer it to the best of what I know. We've asked the committee to come up with phases of suggested improvements. So we're talking about what will be phase 1, and that isn't set in stone yet. It's not determined exactly. And then phase 2 would be another section that the committee would look at, and so forth. New sidewalks, you're entering a new realm, Rich, which I'm not sure we're quite in yet, unless it's a teeny piece that hasn't been taken care of, and it would just allow...
Like the Daniels property, where we're going to connect to make it more walkable.
Right.
I've done work throughout the state. I think the city of Windsor has by far our best system going, where they improve upon it. I did a 3-house project there, half a mile in each direction, and they made us put a sidewalk in. There was no sidewalks there, 10 years. The contractor paid for it to put the new houses in.
Right.
And I said, the sidewalk goes nowhere. It's a half a mile in either direction. They said, give it a few years. 10 years later, you could walk around the block.
Nice.
Because they put money toward it, whatever it may be, $100,000 a year, and they kept increasing their walkability and accessibility, which is real critical, is our ADA accessibility, and we have to watch our codes with that.
All right. Thank you,
Okay,
Rich.
thank you.
That same row? We'll go to the back row? Hello, Mr. Lambrinides.
Hello. For those who don't know, I ran for first selectman a few times, and I've not done very well. But some old people know I'm around, you know, so I still have minority party status. And Mrs. Bransfield, the consummate outsider who comes up with all these la-la lands. I just want to say one thing. You can do there is to some extent some truth to do the sidewalks, no doubt about it. You go out, though, on Freestone Avenue, and I live just across the street. You take a look at my sidewalk. It's pretty good shape. My father put it in, I think, in 1948 or 49, just after we bought the house and came here. The main problem was, of course, is just there where the entrance is for the driveway to bring the cars in. You will also notice, if you have any eyes, when it rains, most of the water, a good percentage of drainage, comes from 23 and 25 Freestone Avenue, where the driveways are even with the road, and mine is not much better. And in fact, if you go look at 19 Freestone Avenue, where it's already busted up, and that's really needs a good repair job there. If the roads, which Mrs. Bransfield is not taking care of, are not brought down 5 or 6 inches, because usually then they put a couple inches up on top, then you don't have a curb. You have to have a curb so the water drains properly. One bad thing about this, you have to reset the storm drains. So that means the Public Works Department's gonna have to do some work. So I'm just saying, where it's applicable, the road should be done. This Band-Aids about, sidewalks and making it pretty and looking and all this, it does not impress me at all. Not one iota at all. So with that, I do have a cold. See you at the next meeting if applicable. Thank you. Oops.
Anybody else in the back row? We'll start, not in the first row, right? Nobody in this row? Second row? Third row? Yes.
Hi, sorry. My name is Carol Hale. I live on Fairview Street. I just want to say I'm sort of aghast that Main Street between Fairview and Spring is off the table tonight, because I really think that a lot of people in Portland voted for this ordinance or voted in
I'm
this.
not sure it's totally off, and I want clarification from the committee chairman, Mr. Herron. Is it completely off?
I don't think anything's totally off.
No.
Okay.
So, speak up.
Okay, but the impression that I got was
Yes.
that it was kind of not being discussed tonight, even though it was in the letter when we got the notification.
Yes, it is.
I really think when people voted for this, that was a very apparent thing that was going to be fixed. Now comes my personal part. I live on Fairview Street. I don't know who walked my sidewalk or walked up from Main to my home, but in my opinion, it's in fine shape. Now, I've heard several times the mention of St. Mary's sidewalk is in fine shape, so we're not ignoring that. So maybe there's a contrast of whose sidewalk is in fine shape and whose sidewalk is not in fine shape. I guess that's all I need to say.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
Dave Rutter, 32 East Main Street. Thanks, Ken, for doing all this work. You guys are doing a good job. I know sometimes it's not appreciated, and I know sometimes you get hollered at for it, and even by me. As far as the sidewalks are concerned, my sidewalks, of course, is fine. But if we do sidewalks, we should start from one side and go to the other side. Concrete guy would probably agree with me. If you do pieces in the middle, it's only going to be a Band-Aid, because you really can't fix a little piece and fix a little piece and fix a little piece, because they're going to frost heave, and then you're going to have the same situation that we're having now. So if you're going to do it, you should start from one corner and go to the other corner and fix them completely, so it doesn't have to be fixed. Because even with snow plowing, you're going to wind up hitting them, you're going to wind up frost heaving them. If we're going to spend the money, let's spend it correctly, even if it is a 50-50 or the town takes it over. Because there's no sense in doing stuff half-assed anymore. Sorry, excuse my language. But really, truthfully, that's really where we got to do this, because it has to be fixed correctly. So it should go from corner to corner and fix one section at a time, and only piece it together where it needs to be pieced together for a safety issue. But because if we're going to spend the money, it needs to be done right. The last meeting, we were talking about doing monolithic pours. Rick, I love you, and I don't have a monolithic pour, but I do know that people who don't have the ability to shovel or have a machine to move snow with the monolithic curbs, we're going to have problems with the snow plowing where it goes up onto the sidewalk, and then we're going to be asking people to shovel real heavy wet snow. I mean, Rick's probably already thought of this too, but it is the easier way to get both of them fixed. I see his point too, or fix both, but it will be an added strain to homeowners who get older, where they will have to shovel that snow from the snow plows coming over, because I do snow plowing, and when you hit that snow, unless you have a machine, it's pretty much impossible to shovel. So that's one thing we should look at. I agree with Rick, we're getting to one thing. But some places, if it isn't that way, it still should have a grassy area, and on the sidewalks that are already to the curb, then they should stay that way. But other than that, I think the town should be responsible for the sidewalks, even though I paid for mine years ago. And it should be a burden for the whole town, because if you live downtown, if anybody is from town, they know that everybody parks at the town hall, and they walk all them sidewalks all through town. So everybody's getting the use of all the sidewalks, and you're only putting the burden on the people who live in town to fix the town sidewalks. So if you're going to do the town sidewalks, even though I paid for mine, I don't really care, but it should be a town responsibility to plow to actually fix the sidewalks. And as the gentleman said, when you put the trees in, if the town's going to put trees in and they cause the damage, then they should be the ones who are responsible for fixing the damage that was caused. That's all I have to say, and thank you all very much.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Ben.
Hi, Sarah.
I am Sarah Sterry-Rutter. I live at 32 East Main Street. And no, I'm not going to disagree with my husband. But during last week's snowstorm, I happened to be out plowing snow on 32 East Main Street. So to actually agree with Mr. Lambros on Fairview Street, because Mr. Bryant lives on Fairview Street, but he mostly lives in New Hampshire. He lives right here on the corner
Freestone.
of Freestone Avenue, at 16 Freestone Avenue. And the sidewalk there is really parallel to the street, because the street has been paved so much at its level. So that becomes a problem, because most of the time you don't really know the difference between the sidewalk and the street. So it becomes a bigger problem when we talk about replacing sidewalks, because one, it's level, two, you can't see where it is, so people sometimes are parking on his sidewalk versus the street. So are we repairing roads or repairing sidewalks, and what that entails? And the other thing is that when people are plowing, in his instance, the people across the street are plowing onto his sidewalk. So now I'm plowing twice as much snow. So here we are, we've got bigger burdens going on because we don't have a complete maintenance of the roads and the sidewalks. And it's not anybody's fault in one sense. It's been a problem that's been going on for time. And it's now time that we have to make a decision to do things. So I don't know if this is something that we should rush into until we actually make a complete decision. What is the best thing? As my husband said, do it in big spans, because even though you get a contractor's price, even a contractor isn't going to want to set up here, because he really should charge you to then set up here, because all that is time and labor.
Right.
And that is not cost saving.
They're only saying with volume, right?
Correct. Correct.
No, absolutely.
So-
I think that's why a lot of the design was to go with larger sections.
Yep.
Other than there are areas that we have to address safety concerns.
Correct.
There will be smaller sections, because it's just not feasible with the money that we have to do the whole thing right now. So theirs would have to be a little bit smaller, but we got you. We got it.
All right.
Yep, good. Thanks, Sarah. Let me ask the others first. Anybody else? Yes, sir. Hi.
Hello, I'm Tim McKinnon, 21 Fairview Street. I'm not in favor of any sharing. I think I already do my share of sharing in my taxes.
Fairview Street, correct?
Fairview
Mr. McKinnon?
Street.
Thank you.
I'm not the only one that walks on those sidewalks, so I think the rest of the community should also contribute to the upkeep of them. That's all I'd like to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rick?
Just to clarify, one point of clarification.
Sure.
And there are two very good points that both Sarah and Mr. Lambrides, I don't know if I said it right, is the issue of curb reveal and a defined gutter line, and they're absolutely right. Just to clarify, the sidewalk project that we're talking about will provide, in any cases, the 6-inch minimum curb reveal, whether it's an integral sidewalk or whether it's a separate sidewalk. So that is one of the reasons we need sometimes, as we've talked about, getting temporary easements, because we have to extend a little bit farther into the property to make sure everything connects, because we're going to be raising the curb heights. Just wanted to make that point.
Thank you, Rick. Anyone else from this side decide, they want to say more? Rich?
One more note is,
Sure.
at a 50-50 split, we're already paying for the bond assessment plus the 50%. So as a property owner, we're more in the 60%. It's more of a 60-40 split. It becomes more burdensome to us as the people who own the sidewalks, quote unquote.
Mathematically, yes, absolutely, you're right.
Okay.
Because the people who are paying for everything in the town are you. If you live in the town, you're paying for everything.
Right.
And you're paying for things in the state, too. It's just, how do we distribute the cost? And I think the selectmen and the committee, the ordinance committee, are really trying to stretch your dollars however we can and still do a quality job. I mean, you still want to have sidewalks that are quality, that are going to last, and that we stretch your dollar as best we can. So if there is a long stretch of sidewalk that really doesn't need repair, we're not going to repair it. We shouldn't. But if it's one or two, and then the next 5 on either side are damaged, then we have to look at the cost benefit there as to whether all 12, 5 on each side and the 2 that may be in good shape are redone because of the cost of setup, and that's when we look to contractors and also bid specifications to help us make that decision. Yes?
Just one clarifying question.
Yep.
When you guys, well, whenever replacement of sidewalks actually happen, say on East Main Street or Spring Street, the ones that have actually like grass in between the sidewalk and the road, as the runner said, when you replace it, would you replace it on just rip up the sidewalks that exist and replace what's there, or would you take out that grass median that exists between the sidewalk and the road and make it, say, like the senior center or
And it
out
depends.
here?
Well, the reason the town did that is that we do have equipment to remove the snow.
Sure.
And it's easier for that equipment to do that. In terms of other areas, we are looking at some of those monolithic in other areas as well. So that could be the case, but the final decision hasn't been made. What do you think?
I personally like the grass with the rudders. I live on Spring Street, but I have my mom and I have family who live on East Main Street. And it is a nice buffer.
Yeah.
One, for the snow plows, because it is impossible to get through that depending on how many inches of snow. It is literally impossible to shovel that some days with the rock ice boulders and everything that it gets in there. So it's a pretty good buffer for that. Another thing is on East Main Street, Waverly, over the last couple of years, there has been a big boom of younger families and kids that are in that neighborhood. They're all riding their bikes, they run up and down the street and they play. The thought of the kids riding their bikes, running around on the sidewalk that's literally 6 inches from the road is a little frightening, considering people do, and anybody who lives on that road would know, people lie down that street and they blow the stop signs, particularly the stop sign at Waverly and East Main. They blow it on a continual basis, and just the vision of somebody falling off the sidewalk and a car just taking them out is just a little bit squeamish for me, but.
The other thing I'll just point out,
And it looks nicer.
because we've also talked about curbing your dog, and the dog would go between the sidewalk and the curb, not between the sidewalk and the person's house. So that's the other reason, in a more congested neighborhood, you have grass next to the sidewalk, so that the animal goes in the public side, not the private residence side.
Well, that would also be conducive with your new ordinance.
Yes.
With an 8-foot leash, at 8 feet, they're at my door.
It's amazing the things you think of when you're a first selectman, where dogs have to be taken care of. But there are elements of that. But in the public areas, I will point out those sidewalks are a little, they're wider, right, Rick? The ones on Fairview are slightly wider.
They're half a foot wider. And I do it, yeah, for anyone that's interested, if you are interested in what the treatment of the sidewalk would be in front of your residence, I can show you what that would be. I have the plans. They're preliminary. What I also can tell you is that, for the most part, East Main, for example, you would leave the grass there. There's a nice grass strip. However, there are, for example, Waverly, most of the sidewalks are right up to the edge of the road. Those would be monolithic. Some areas we can't do the monolithic right up to the road because there's hydrants, power poles, et cetera, so we wouldn't. So again, we tried to use our best judgment as to where those types of sidewalks would be, and really wouldn't.
Makes sense.
So,
Good point. Anybody else?
Just, could you
Yes,
clarify
Chris.
what we're doing on East Main Street? We took the trees down and then we kind of left it, and it's not on the sidewalk plan.
I can probably
Sure,
best
Rick.
answer that. East Main has always been a street that the sidewalk subcommittee has tried to address. We've all looked at it. It's probably one of the prettiest streets, I think, personally, in town. Does it get the most use? Probably not. So, in the course of the discussions of the subcommittee, they obviously are concerned about trees and losing trees and the impact of the sidewalk on the tree and who planted the tree and did the tree raise the sidewalk and if, all the things that you brought up. Nobody really knows who planted the trees. Maybe the town did, maybe not, maybe the homeowner. Most of those trees are quite old. So when we looked at East Main specifically, and we were looking at the east side of East Main, which is the worst, I brought to the attention of the subcommittee. I said, if you're going to replace that sidewalk, you got to remove the trees. Because the same thing's going to, you can't, a lot of the roots are right up over the sidewalk. So those trees are going to have to go. Obviously, some of the sidewalk committee was very adverse to that, as many are. So we hired an arborist. And we walked all the streets with an arborist, a good arborist. And she came back and said that the following trees, irregardless of whether you put a sidewalk there or not, should go because they're in bad condition and they're a liability. So she identified, I believe there's 6. She said, no matter what you do, take these trees down because they're going to fall and they're going to hurt somebody that's walking along the sidewalk or on the road. I immediately, as the tree warden, took them down. Okay, there are other trees on the east side of East Main Street, if you're going to replace that sidewalk, that will also have to come down, some prime trees. So again, it's one of those deals where you can't have your cake and eat it too. You got all kinds of things. You got hydrants, we got all kinds of obstructions to the sidewalk in the way. And it isn't always easy to deal with those. Right now, the plan is, because we were kind of in conflict as to East Main Street, the plan now was to try to just do the section from Freestone up to Waverly so that you have a connective route from, for example, Waverly to Freestones. The other thing that should be said here and hasn't been is the subcommittee has done a nice job on dealing with a tough issue. And they did a good job in setting up criteria, and a lot of time was spent in saying, what sidewalks should we do? From the start, when we first started, there was sidewalks up on William Street, and sidewalks down here, and sidewalks over there, and sidewalks in the state right away, and the subcommittee kind of set up a good system that worked. Then it prioritized the sidewalks for basically 3 reasons. One, worst condition are the ones that they've identified on that drawing. Most heavily used, again, on that. Most of those are on the list. And connectivity. Let's do something that makes a statement, that starts something. So we didn't want to say, okay, let's do a piece over here, a piece over there, and something here, something there. What the sidewalk subcommittee is trying to do is say, okay, we're going to make a start, and we're going to make it so you can see it. So again, if you take all the criteria that they used, I think what they've come up with as recommendations are good ones. So it isn't always right or it isn't always wrong, but I think they've made a good attempt at coming up with a method that starts phase 1, that kind of makes a statement to say, you need to go further. You haven't done anything in 70 years. You got an ordinance that doesn't work. You don't enforce it. And you got a mess. And you got an infrastructure that's just horrendous. And you got all kinds of liability. We don't, presently under the ordinance, the liability is the adjacent owners. And it's never been proven wrong. We haven't paid in 23 years I've been here for a sidewalk claim. It falls back to the homeowners. So when you start thinking about, well, Jesus, you're going to hit me with 50%. Well, right now, your burden is 100%, and your liability is 100%, unless the court finds otherwise. So maybe the 50-50 isn't the worst deal around, because maybe the liability end of that falls now to the town and not to you. It's a very complicated issue, and I'm not trying to make it simple, but there's been a lot of thought by the Board of Selectmen, by the a lot of people have thought a lot about this issue, and it's complicated, as you can see. So there's been no real harsh decisions, and that's why we're here, trying to get feedback, and it's good feedback, so thank you.
Thank you. Dave?
Because I agree with Rick. When somebody was mentioning about the trees on East Main Street coming down. I think I mentioned this last meeting. I do construction work. I did my sidewalk. I did my driveway. I used to have two beautiful red maple trees, red maples in my yard. I had to take one down and redo my driveway. My sidewalk's been there for almost 25 years I've been married. I redid the sidewalk the first or second year I was there. It doesn't have one crack in it. But again, it was built right. I took all the stuff away that was going to damage the sidewalk. Now, we all love trees. Up and down south, I love trees. But I'm not going to spend $2,000 to fix a sidewalk and put a tree there that's going to damage the sidewalk again. Same reason I took down my beautiful red maple trees. The driveway cost me 10 grand. I don't want to spend 10 grand again in another 10 years. So we're bitching about money. But remember, if you're going to complain about the money and then you want to say, I want to put a tree up, remember, that tree will damage that sidewalk again. We can put potted trees up, you can plant a tree on your own property if you want it, but again, you say the town put the trees up and it's damaged the sidewalk and you want the town to pay for it, but you don't want to take the trees down. So put a tree up in your yard, and if it damages the sidewalk, then you're responsible for it. But again, if we're going to spend the money, again, I don't mind spending the money, I already spent the money, I think the town should take over the cost of the sidewalks, but again, if you're going to do it, please don't damage the stuff that we're going to put good money towards to say that, oh, I want it to look good. Because I put two nice little gardens in my front yard, so I didn't damage the sidewalks to bring the beauty back to the front yard. So do something, if you're going to do it, don't do it stupid. Do it right and do it right the first time, and it'll last a long time.
Thank you, Dave.
Put that on a t-shirt.
Yeah.
You can.
I don't know if you want to look at some of these plans that Rick has. Where are they, Rick? Are they?
They're not greatly detailed. I mean, really, and it's not, this I don't think is a meeting where you need to get into detail. If someone here, for example, has a question, what's the treatment of the sidewalk in front of my house? I'd be happy to meet with you after. I'll go out, between now
Into
and
the
I can go out
library?
there and show you. It's not a great amount of detail. I've got your house name, it'll show you where you are, it'll show you kind of what we're doing. It's not anything great. Or if anyone has a question, probably the better option is, I'm at the town hall all the time. I do call Public Works, I'll either meet with you, I'll come to you, you can come to me, and I can show you where we're at. Now, this all may change, just so you understand, because the Board of Selectmen has not yet made a decision. So now they're talking about other streets than what we got here. And the board may choose not to do some of the streets that the subcommittee has recommended. So right now, I don't exactly know.
Well, there's
That's why-
maps there if you want to look at them
So
tonight.
feel free to call me,
or
or
come to
I'll
the
meet
public
with you.
works. Is there any other comment tonight? And again, if you think of something you forgot, just either email me, sbransfield@portlandct.org, or give a call to the town hall, either to Rick or to me, and we'll try to include it in the minutes so that we can help the selectmen make this important decision. If there's no further comment, at this point, we'll close the hearing at 7:50. Thank you. We're going to convene our regularly scheduled meeting.
Thank you, everybody, for the feedback.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next item on the agenda is approval of the January 3, 2018 minutes. Is there a motion to approve?
I make a motion
Yeah, it's a finance meeting, so we'll
It's
just,
regular on it.
yep, we'll just change it to, it's a regularly scheduled finance meeting, finance board of selectmen meeting. January 3rd, motion was made by Lou. And
second it.
seconded by Michael. Any changes, errors, or omissions? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Motion to approve the agenda as presented.
So moved.
Is there a
Second.
Seconded by Ralph. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Communications and correspondence. I don't believe I have anything tonight other than what we read earlier in the sidewalk committee. So we'll move on to public comment. Is there any public comment tonight? Thank you. And number 7, sidewalks, old business. I'll open it up to the selectmen for a summary or comments on our public hearing that we just had. Who would like to start? Ralph?
Well, I guess what I'd say is that we've sat in so many meetings, and it's good to be able to get some feedback from the neighbors, because we can only go so far with the thoughts and the ideas that we discuss. So I thought it was fruitful, and there were, like the last meeting, the one when I wasn't even member of Board of Selectmen, there were good comments at that one, and I thought there were just as many good comments tonight.
Yeah, I thought it was, like the last one that we had, I think it was last October, it was instructive. I think it was important that we presented a full range of options, both from, looking at the streets and potential universe of work to be done, and options to accomplish it. I think people understand the pros and cons, and I think we have some good feedback to move forward on, so that's helpful. I was very happy with the work of the committee. We were, just so, put it in, we had the committee was meeting a couple times a week, some weeks, trying to really talk through a lot of these issues, so very complex in terms of trying to figure out the best way to go. So I know I appreciated the work and the research and the homework that it took to try to make sure we understood it and came up to speed on it, so. But the feedback tonight was tremendous, and I'm glad we got through that.
Yeah, I agree. It's good, always great to have good feedback from the public, because that's important. The committee, the sidewalk committee, has done a great job. They've been working for a long time on an issue that is hard. It's not an easy issue, and Rick was explaining that earlier, that, there's so much you can do with $1 million, and how do you do that and make sure that you address the issues of connectivity, safety, and usability, and take into consideration all those things, and you don't have $3 million. So how do you make it work so that you address the needs of all the residents?
I think what stood out to me was, besides just the good feedback, the fact that we had so many people engaged in town that want to know about it. I think they gave as much thought to this as I think the committees have, in terms of what to do, and not just in their own specific interest, but also what's in the interest of the town. That just makes me feel good about us as a group, us as a town, trying to figure out what's in the best interest of all of us. Everyone's using the streets, everyone's using the sidewalks, and I found that really stood out today. So I think that gives me hope that we can get this thing done and get it done right, and have as much agreement as we can on an issue that's obviously hit a nerve with a lot of people. They're interested in this. It's $1 million. Everyone cares about every dollar. So it's good.
Well, I took a full page of notes. Everybody that spoke, it was enlightening, and I've vacillated in my thoughts as to which way, whose responsibility it is, and I think I need to hear from the town attorney on some of the legal ramifications of who's responsible, and when there's accidents on the sidewalk, and that sort of thing. But I appreciate the input, and I really appreciate the work that Jim Tripp did with his committee. I went to one of the meetings, missed a bunch of them, but everybody on the board was in communication, even if they weren't at the meetings. I had a long phone chat with Lou Pear the other day, and I think as a board, we're doing a good job of trying to reach a consensus, fair decision. Everybody's weighing in on this, and everybody's given it a lot of thought. So it was very good to hear from the townspeople, and I thought it was a nice meeting. Everybody was very civil and made for a good meeting. Thank you.
John, did you want to say anything from any other committee members, Mike or Bob? Thank you for both committees. I know there's been a lot of work done. And as I think Rick stated, and maybe some of the other selectmen, I've learned a lot by listening to these hearings, and also after you digest what's said, I think it's helpful in terms of formulating a plan going forward. So I'd like to see the committee meet again, the ordinance committee at minimum. I know that the sidewalk committee meets on a regular schedule. Anyway, when is your next meeting for the sidewalk committee?
First Tuesday in February, whatever date that is.
I think it'll be 6th.
So, yeah.
I think it's 6th of February. I'm going to try to attend that and see some feedback from your group, and also I've been attending the ordinance committee. I think we sleep on it and give a lot of thought to the input that we received, and I suspect some other people may bring forward some other ideas, as we had some written comments tonight. And I encourage our viewers who maybe weren't able to be here tonight to let us know their thoughts on the topic. Thank you, Bob, and thank you, Jeff.
I can just add one thing.
Yes.
The committee, the sidewalk committee didn't vote on anything at our last meeting, but I think it's fair to say from the conversation that in terms of thinking of phase 2, we were looking mostly at Main Street.
Okay.
The work is not nearly done with phase 1, I think. So it will remain on the agenda as we proceed, and we'll get more input from the committee. Animal ordinance, I did put in the selectmen's packet some information, and I got some feedback from some of our audience. And there was an error on the roaming and nuisance animals that I handed out to you. Letter A should read, no owner of any animal instead of or. It's no owner of any animal shall allow such animal to create a nuisance or roam at large on town property. Should be added there. While it's not in control by means of a leash not to exceed 8 feet in length, held continuously in the hands of a responsible person capable of controlling it. And a suggestion is, no owner of any animal shall allow such animal to roam on private property at any time. And then the last would be, provided that nothing in this section shall be construed to limit or prohibit the use of hunting dogs during the open hunting or training season, or any animal while performing or being exhibited in a bench show or exhibition. There's also, I don't know whether we want to put anything about curbing dogs, as opposed to having dogs utilize front lawns as their relieving areas. Some of the ordinances have that. I'll look into that and get the proper language and bring it back to you. I don't think it's ready for a public hearing yet. Any other comments from the selectmen on that?
What was the statement on private property?
No owner of any animal shall allow such animal to roam on private property at any time.
Except for their own?
Yeah.
Right, I mean, that's, we have to make sure that's...
Those are some of the legal things that I'll need to make sure are clear.
The only thing I was going to comment is,
I'm not a dog owner, so the length doesn't have a lot of meaning to me, but if I recall when we had the list, when you had done a survey of other towns, there were some that said 6 and some that said 8. So I don't know, as a non-dog owner, I don't know. Obviously, I've heard comments in the sidewalk meeting about what an 8-foot means, but I don't know on length what that really means. So dog owners that might be in this.
I was gonna say, I don't think if you're on a curb and you're that close to private property, I don't think 6 is bad. Because you've only got, a 4 or 5 foot wide curb to deal with, and so it's on somebody's private property. I think the idea too of keeping it curbside is also good, to protect, people's private property. One of the reasons that I am a dog owner, so I'll just, obviously I pay attention to these issues, but, for example, the reason I asked about the private property is, I have electric fence at my house. So my dog roams on my property, but yet in 7 years has never crossed that boundary. So it's, so anyway, that's what I've done.
David, did you?
If he wants, I can show him a picture of what we mean by the 6 and 8 foot, because I took a couple
We
pictures.
had taken some of those pictures,
If I can.
because originally, when, at that last meeting, some towns were 6 feet, some were 8, and there was one town that had 10 feet. And of course, we live on East Main Street, and quite a few of those houses, 8 feet puts people's, including.
Here's a
if you
picture of
don't
my
have a
house.
leash with a
This is a
2-foot
town
arm,
sidewalk.
10 feet puts a dog
This right
on
here
front steps.
is 8 feet.
So I kind of suggested.
The
Susan,
first
that
one?
there
This
is
first one.
a
That one's 10, and the next
addition
one's
there that
12.
says, no
So if
one's
you have
allowed to
somebody
have a
has an
dog
8-foot leash in their
roaming
hands
on
out,
private property.
at one point,
Because
they
although
could
you
be
have a
almost
fence,
up on
a
my,
dog can walk
up on
through
my
that
front
fence
door
and be
at
on
10
your
feet.
I wouldn't want
And
that.
that's-
I think it's
so
either
that's
by the
what I'm
6 or
saying.
8.
So they can have the 8-foot leash, but know that if you allow them to roam on somebody's private property,
Leashed or unleashed?
you have really taken away.
Oh, no, I agree with you. I just wanted the technical piece of,
It doesn't matter whether
yeah.
it's 6, 8, or 10
Oh, you're saying if you're
now.
making no roaming on private property, then it's a moot point.
Yeah.
Correct, so it wouldn't really matter at that leash
Okay.
length anymore. Because again, this way, if they were down at the park where people like to go, they're at a decent length. That's comfortable for the dog, where 6 is kind of short, and 10 might be too long,
Yeah.
and impede on other people who have another dog. So it's kind of a happy medium for other people to be within that area, down at the river area
Right.
walking.
And some of it shouldn't even have a leash length. I really hate to tell you.
It's common
I'm
sense.
one of the ones with the problem here, with the people, but as long as the dogs don't go on other people's property, and then the people who are walking the dogs want to hold the people who own that property responsible, this is really only a provision to protect property owners from dogs going on their property. Because if you're over in a town hall, in the park, and you got a 25-foot leash, like you say, I'm a dog lover. I loved it. At 10 years ago, my dog and every other dog used to run around the town hall, leash free.
And you
But
should be able
it's
to let
really,
the dog run
it's
in the
really
field
only
at
a
a
protection for the
20-foot
people
length.
about
But-
people going on their property with their dog. I mean, really, we're making a big issue. And again, I'm one of the ones that made the big issue because it's cost me a lot of money for this. But I'm a dog lover. I really don't think that all this was like so necessary. But again, it cost me a lot of money to fix something that really didn't need to be fixed because I was being sued for it.
I'll put these thoughts back into this and give it to you the next time.
Good, thanks.
And then at some point, we will have, when the selectmen are ready, we will establish a public hearing date and we'll have more discussion. This is good. Appointments to boards and commissions. I know Mike has some tonight. And I gave a copy to you, Sharon, so that you have correct spelling. Mike?
All right. Library Board of Directors for reappointment, David C. Richardson.
Is there a second?
Second. Oh,
Seconded
whatever.
by Ralph? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
To the same Library Board of Directors, reappointment is Peter J. Etlinger. Pronounce it properly?
Lou?
I'll second that.
Lou is seconding that one. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
All right. To the Senior Citizens Advisory Board for reappointment, Ruth D. Kalinowski.
Who's second?
Lou could do it. I'll take the refunds. He could take
Okay.
the...
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
To the Water and Sewer Commission, renominated Richard H. Cody.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Lou. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
To the Commission Board on Implementation of the Plan of Conservation and Development, initial appointment member, Wayne Martin.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Mr. Pear. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
To that same board, initial appointment as alternate, Angela Hammond.
Second.
Seconded by Lou. All in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. And I think Jim is going to nominate two folks to two other appointments.
Trying to find them. All right. Sorry, had other things on my mind this evening. I'd like to nominate the Planning and Zoning Commission as an alternate, David Bond.
Is there a second?
I'll second, I guess.
Ralph, thank you. A second by Ralph. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
I got this one.
Who's got this one?
And I'll nominate the Library Board of Directors, Laurel Steinhauser.
I'm going to second that.
Second by Mr. Pelton. All in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you. Nicely done. Now we have refunds. Did someone say they had this under control?
I'll do him. He said he wants to second.
Okay. Good night, Mr. Aguilar.
All right, I'd like to make a motion to refund $42.24 and $1.92 to Henry B. Prescott Jr.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
Make a motion to refund $259.43 to Toyota Lease Trust.
Second.
Seconded by Ralph. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
Make a motion to refund $30.88 to William G. Olson.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, make a motion to refund $100.61 and $101.82 to John E. Paul.
Second.
Seconded by Ralph. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Status and committee reports. I think Jim was going to update us on Route 17. Were you?
No, I think what we actually want to talk a little bit about tonight, about establishing a special
Okay.
meeting for Route 17.
A joint
They're-
meeting?
They're ready to come and do a joint meeting with us and give us a status
That's
update.
We have open either a week from tonight or 2 weeks from tonight. Week from tonight is the 24th, and the 31st is 2 weeks.
I think that, I
I'm-
thought Brian had mentioned the 24th potentially to the committee, so that might be the better one, if possible.
And I think the fact that we're working towards trying to get, bid prep and all that ready to go, the sooner the better.
Would that be 7:30 or 7? What's your schedules?
7's fine.
I can
7
accommodate
fine
you,
with
but 7 is
everybody?
fine.
7 is fine.
Seven
When is this?
7 o'clock next week.
We have a board meeting?
No, it's a special
Special meeting.
17 meeting.
Okay.
We want to present to us.
We
where
want to
they're at.
just talk about the Route 17 park with, it'd be a joint meeting, Rick, with the committee. Now, the committee also invited us to their meeting, which is Monday.
Yes.
That's another possibility. I don't know if
Yeah,
you-
actually, you did that as well. Well, I'll be there, I'll be there anyway, so.
What Monday is it that they meet?
Or is it this coming Monday?
coming Monday.
Well, what it is they
Oh.
typically meet the 1st and the 3rd, but because of the holiday, they shifted, or,
I
no,
know
the
that I
sec,
cannot
whatever
be
it is.
The Brownstone Quorum has their annual meeting
But,
on Monday.
but Brian, the chairman, Brian McCarthy, said he could make the 24th.
But he mentioned either one as being, the time, so.
Then we'll make it the 24th, since that's our regular scheduled meeting, and we'll be here. So is there a motion to have a special meeting? The purpose, which will be to have a meeting on the Route 17 joint meeting with the committee of the recreational park.
So moved.
And I'll second it.
If I have the land acquisition ready, the purchase and sale agreement is nearly completed. Would I have your permission to put that on as well?
Yes.
So we may have two items. One would be a joint meeting with the Park and Rec
Committee.
17 committee, Recreational Park Committee. And then the only thing would be to set a town meeting date at that meeting, should the purchase and sale agreement be ready. So that'll be a friendly amendment to that special meeting. And that was made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Any other committee reports tonight?
I was just going to indicate that, although I have attended the library board meeting, and I actually had a conversation because I can't make tomorrow's, I would like to you could formally put me in as liaison for the library board.
So we will record in the minutes that the liaison from the Board of Selectmen will be Ralph Zampano to the Library Board of Directors. Is that okay with everybody?
Okay.
Yes. We just record that, thank you. Any other committee reports? Rick?
I went to last week's EDC meeting, and they had their monthly update of Elmcrest progress, and they talked about also getting together with Mary Dickerson and Elwyn, but Mary's pretty much going to get together local Main Street businesses, and I believe they're going to try to have sort of like what we did with the sidewalks, get some input as to what the business community needs help with, and try to outline a plan of just support for them. So, and they've been talking about that now for the last several meetings, but it looks like they're starting to get some headway going there.
Great, very good. Thank you for the reports. Public comment? Yes, Dave?
Earlier at the sidewalk thing, I would like to apologize for some of the words I was saying towards you about some of your lack of stuff that you do from Mr. Lambros. You know what I mean? I know everybody here is doing it's a hard job to try to please everybody, and sometimes the hate spewing is really not necessary. Not that we always have to agree, but, it's a hard enough job without people throwing hate either way, so I apologize. And you have to actually hear that at it, and it was even at a place, it wasn't even about the sidewalk.
Well, that's very thoughtful of you. Thank you, David. I do think it is. I would agree that I think civil discourse is very important, and we do need, and I think 99% of the time, we do have very good civil discourse. We don't always agree, and it is important to hear what people have to say. So thank you for that. Appreciate it. And I think that, I hope everyone feels comfortable going to the podium and making their comments, and I think they do. And I think that's credit to our town, that we can disagree civilly. Thank you. General informal discussion?
Susan?
Yes.
On these sidewalks, where there was, no, I
heard of them.
Yeah. Maybe somebody out there can comment to it. What's this monolithic style? I understood there's, some you have the road, then you have some grass, and then you have the sidewalk.
Have you been to the senior center recently?
Yeah, well, I always park in back, but
No, you gotta park in the front.
Okay.
And when you park right in front of the front door, your wheels are right next to the curb, and then the sidewalk is right next to that curb. It's monolithic, it's one.
Oh, one pour, like one.
It's thicker.
Okay.
The curb is a denser material, so it is a curb, weight, but the sidewalk is connected right to it, and that goes to the grass or to the entrance of the sidewalk. Along Fairview Street, we put in a monolithic sidewalk from East Main to Foley Road. And when Carl Johnson takes care of the sidewalks, he has one of these little, I think it's a Kubota, Dave?
Yes,
With a little, sometimes a little.
like a sweeper, or they got a sweeper and a snow blower.
Yeah, and it goes right along the side of it, goes whoosh, it takes all the snow right off. But it's a machine that's able to pick up all the snow and throw it over to the,
Dirt side.
Dirt
to the-
side.
to the- A monolithic curb is mainly, what they do is because we do have bad curbs in town, and I understand why Rick is doing the monolithic curb, because it repairs the curb and the sidewalk at the same time. They dig it right out from the road over, they dig it deeper on the curb side, so it's down the 2 foot that it's supposed to be, and then it's wedged up, so concrete curb and the sidewalk is poured at one time. That's why they call it a monolithic pour, because it's just poured at the same time. There's no seam, like a granite curb and then the sidewalk's attached to it, or the curb's poured and then the sidewalk's poured. It's one solid, so it lasts better, but the problem is, like I say, when you snow plow, you plow right onto the sidewalk. That's why my mention
Oh,
was
because
that-
there's no
because there is
space.
no buffer between
Okay.
the curb and the sidewalk, so all your plowing are on the sidewalk. So unless you have a machine, like I said, you're making it a lot harder for the public to have to shovel.
And that's,
that.
somebody commented about that,
That was
shoveling. That was you?
me.
Okay.
And my wife.
Well, in a previous meeting, one of the, I don't remember who it was, at the previous public meeting, one person had mentioned, you get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and you go out and shovel, you go and take a shower, and you come back out to go to work, and the snowplow just came by, and poof, there's the whole new batch. And oftentimes, after a few snowplows in the morning, it's now wet and icy.
It's
And
freezing.
so as soon as it's freezing cold, now it's an ice block. So
Okay.
now if we have that grass barrier there, it's on the grass, and we're only having to shovel our driveway versus all
Yep.
that sidewalk, which we are responsible for. It's a lot harder for the homeowner, because if they don't have a machine, they're hand shoveling through this thick piece of ice.
And every time they plow, you would have to be shoveling your sidewalk again because there is no buffer there. So every time they go by, they're gonna cover your sidewalk.
Bob, did you
So
want
what,
to-
Bob, the next question's for you. So what kind of sidewalk is the committee kind of proposing?
Well, I think until we go out to bid, we don't know. But what Rick has tried to say is wherever we can, where right now, most of the sidewalks that we're looking at are only 4 feet, and a lot of them are a lot less because of growth from the, homeowner's lawn, growth from the street coming in where there's no curb. So we're trying to put 5 foot wherever we can. So that's gonna give an extra space to some people that right now, I'll just say some areas like on Fairview, Lower Fairview, if you wanna refer to that, and Waverly, they might have a buffer, but the buffer might only be like 6 inches, it's not like there's a foot there. However, if you look at like East Main, there are some areas where there's a 3-foot buffer or something like that. And in those areas, I believe Rick is not thinking of, if we were to replace there, that we do monolithic because they have a nice border. We're not gonna,
Rick had mentioned that, because here's a perfect example, like right over here on.
Yeah,
on-
Waverly is the one.
No, wait a minute, but right
Fairview.
outside here on Freestone Avenue, you have the sidewalk here on this side of the road that is parallel to the street.
Same level? Like-
Correct. So a monolithic pour out here would be good, because it could help us build the curb back up and replace the sidewalk all one shot, and recreate the curb.
Right, okay.
Works great in that situation. But like you said, and it's less expensive, all done one shot. Whereas, where you already have the grass,
buffer.
let's leave that.
You have that issue on Waverly, on the north side, is curb and sidewalk all the way up, because that's where it goes up the hill to the people's houses, and some people have walls. So that's already there. There is no buffer zone between the road and the sidewalk. On the south side of Waverly, there's only like 6 inches, or even less than a foot on the south side of Waverly. So Waverly is almost completely where, when they plow, they're plowing onto the sidewalk already.
And
And
that's-
there's no place to put a buffer zone.
And
But where
that's
there
the
is a
same-
buffer zone is where I was asking, because they were trying to fix curbs. And East Main has, all their curbs are pretty much even in front of the town hall. If you go down the Main Street side of East Main Street, the curbs are all pretty much beat up. and that's why he was saying.
Are they beat up from snowplows
Oh,
hitting
yeah,
them?
snowplows always beat up curbs.
Yeah.
I mean, it's inevitable to beat up a curb when you plow. You're gonna hit a curb and you're gonna break it up. And that would be another thing where you look at the monolithic curb, because if you damage the curb, you're also gonna damage the sidewalk, because it is a monolithic, or it's a single pour. So if you chip the curb, you're chipping the sidewalk.
And that's the
So,
same way on
there are a
Spring
couple things you
Street,
gotta look at.
the area where they want to put that water main in too. That's where the sidewalk and the road are the same as well. Because the road over time has been built
Built
up.
up.
Exactly.
Because it wasn't like that when we were
No.
in school, I mean, sidewalk.
Well, that
Over the
happens
years,
every
it
month.
keeps building up the road.
I know, I went in 1822.
Well, it's cheaper because it
Looked pretty
costs more
good for
money
going to school all those
That's
years
bad.
ago.
But it costs more money to tear the road out and rebase and re-pour, blacktop than it is to just reseal. So that's really what's happened.
Okay, thank you.
On another note, on Friday, I follow up to our Department of Agriculture situation and the dog that we got at least a preliminary hearing on that situation, but the Department of Agriculture Commissioner has not ruled. So Christy Carpino has established, hopefully, on Friday at noon, she's invited me to attend, and she's asked the commissioner to come and speak with her to see what's going on with the fate of the dog that has been in that situation on Old Marlboro Turnpike. And also on Friday, just I think a shout out to Megan Kasparowski, who is the kid governor of the state of Connecticut from Brownstone Intermediate School. Many of us attended her celebration at Biz, and I'll be attending, and others are welcome as well. Her inauguration is at the Old State House on Friday. So if you want some information on that, Selectmen, let me know, and I'll let you know the exact time. I think it's in the morning. I think it's at 9 o'clock. So, but let me know and I'll forward it on. But congratulations to Megan and to Portland. We have a governor, kid governor, who is learning the importance of public service and public speaking. So congratulations to you. I think I also wanted to state that the Complete Streets group, of which Bob is a member, and others assisted me, and we came up with a short article that will be in the River East, and we're going to try to do that on a monthly basis to remind people how important it is that they slow down, that they follow the posted speed limits or go less, and also walk and bicycle correctly. And we're going to be coming up with other suggestions. At the same time, the police will be stepping up enforcement, and in particular this month, they're on Main Street. So make sure you go the speed limit and stop at the red lights and stop at stop signs. Ron Millardo said that he was, this past week, for half an hour, he watched the traffic in front of the police department and caught 4 cars that ran not a yellow light, but a red light. He pulled them all over and had a good educational session with each of those drivers. And we'll be continuing that solid education until such time as they're not being educated. There'll be tickets.
Again, when the bikers are biking down Main Street because they never stop in front of them. Except you.
Bicycles also, and pedestrians have to follow the rules. You don't walk when the green light is the wrong way, and you don't bicycle through a red light or a stop sign. So we're going to be stepping up that enforcement, and I encourage all of you to speed, to tell people not to speed. And also,
You should sit on the corner of East Main and Fairview, where they just cut down those trees. So the amount of people that run that stop sign, unbelievable.
it is, and I
That's
know
probably
because I
the
travel that.